Hey, this week we're back to it with more about snaps, more about AI, and then DreamWorks, Codeweavers, MariaDB, and NVIDIA. Boy, it's quite the mashup. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 140, recorded February 24th. Autocorrect as a service. Hey, welcome. It is Saturday, and it is time to geek out about Linux. It's the Untitled Linux Show. Welcome, everybody. Not just me, we've got the panel with us. Got David filling in for Jeff, who is out playing hooky. No, he had some real-life stuff come up and is not able to make it today. And then we've got Ken, and we've got Rob. Good to see each of you here today. We are getting a late start because, as we said before the show, the dog ate my homework. No, actually, a battery backup died, and I was having to scramble to get everything plugged in and not kill the laptop while trying to get ready for the show.
Which killed the laptop.
Interestingly enough. So it's just been one of those days. But we're going to dive right into the fun stuff. Rob, who never shies away from poking the bee's nest, the hornet's nest, is going to once again talk about snaps and Flatpaks and app images. Oh my. Take it away, Rob.
So it is time for another browser benchmark between various package types. I did this benchmark a couple of years ago, and that time I did it on Fedora, and the results were fairly interesting for anybody who saw them. This week, I did the benchmarks again, but on Linux Mint. I added another benchmark tool for comparison and also tested the app image, which I don't think I tested last time. So my tests are with Firefox on Linux Mint, comparing the native Firefox it's installed on Linux Mint, and then the snap, and then the Flatpak, and the app image. In my tests, some of them took 2 or 3 seconds to start up the first time, but every other time after that, it was less than a second. So it's pretty comparable. Nothing worth noting on that part. Now, before I get into the results, I would like to poll the panel here to see which one you think is the fastest. And the same goes for the Discord crowd. Tell us which you think is the fastest and which you think is the slowest between native, snap, Flatpak, and app image.
Native should always be fastest.
I would agree with that. Native should be fastest, and if it's not, something is broken. For the slowest, it probably depends. I would think the order should be native, and then app image should basically be tied for first, and then snap and Flatpak should be tied for last. Ken, you want to unmute yourself and come up with any thoughts?
Yeah, theoretically.
My guess is that it's going to be native, Flatpak, and then app and image and snap are going to be tied for last.
All right. So my test results were consistent for the fastest and slowest package types, but the second and third place was a little mixed, depending on the benchmark tool. So as most reasonable people would probably guess, Speedometer and Jetstream 2 both ranked Snap as the slowest, with an average speedometer score of 160 and a Jetstream 2 score of 115.203. Speedometer placed the native Firefox only slightly better than Snap at 166 for Speedometer, and Jetstream 2 though placed it in a second place at 120.363. Speedometer placed App Image in a close second place with the score of 172, but Jetstream 2 placed it in third place with 120.145. Those watching can actually see my results in a grid above my head here. But the clear winner, again, is Flatpak. Somehow, Flatpak gets a first place win on Speedometer at 174, and on Jetstream 2 with 121.710 consistently across both benchmarking tools I tested on. And the last time I did this test, Snap was the slowest, and surprisingly, then too, Flatpak was the fastest. So once again, approximately 2 years or so later, Snap is still the slowest, and somehow Flatpak is still optimized to be the fastest. This wasn't even the same system I tested on 2 years ago. So results may vary. If you want to run your own test, all you got to do is run over to browserbenchmark.org, and there's a few different packages. There's a speedometer, the Jetstream 2, and you can run your own tests there. Also, for added clarity, this was ran on what was it? It was a 2-core, 8 gigabit memory system with Linux Mint. So maybe it's going to vary for you guys. I'd love to hear, but so far it's been consistent for me.
Yeah.
Snap is slow. Flatpak's been fast.
Interesting stuff. Now, the Flatpak, I don't think that's an official Mozilla Firefox release. You have some projects where they'll release their own Flatpaks, and so I could see maybe there'd be some optimizations built into that. They'll use whatever distro is the kind of the I want to say basement foundation. Wow, the foundation of it, whichever one works fastest. Because different distros will have different libraries, and you can have some advantages there.
I wonder what the difference on the Snap would be as far as its speed when compared with, you said Linux Mint, right?
Yeah, these were all ran on Linux Mint.
To Ubuntu distro.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to run the test on a different distro, maybe Ubuntu itself. Although Mint, you probably are running the Ubuntu version of Mint.
Yeah, it was the Ubuntu version, so it is based on Ubuntu. But I guess, like you said, I think last week, that apparently for security purposes, at least, you said Ubuntu actually does some out of the tree kernel patches. Yeah. Out of the tree kernel patch. So, I mean, I don't know if that could have any effect on speed, or if that's purely security. And heck, if it increases security, it might make it slower.
Sometimes that's how that goes.
Did you mention that they were faster after the initial run?
Yeah. The actual startup of the Flatpak and the Snap, the first time it took about 2 to 3 seconds. That was not an official time, as me kind of just watching it go. And then consecutive times after that, they were all about the same. Seemed like less than a second.
I was just wondering if there could be any caching or anything going on differently. But anyway, very interesting.
Yep.
And not what I expected, as I always went on record and said.
That's not what we ever expect.
That's always the fun thing about running benchmarks. You can guess, you can have theories, but the benchmarks is really where it's at.
Did you do any benchmarking with playing back video?
No.
Browser?
No, because I mean the tests, they run a bunch of JavaScript things themselves, and that's the score they give them. If you go to that browserbench.org, you can run that on your current browser that you're running right now.
Yeah, it may even have some video playback built into it. Let's pivot and talk DreamWorks. Ken, why are we talking about DreamWorks, the animation studio, when we're talking about Linux and open source?
Oh, because they do have open source. In fact, Christine Hall asks if we know that DreamWorks Moonray render is open source. If you've been following the Untitled Linux Show since we began, you already know that Moonray was released as open source last March. If you don't, then Christine's article covers DreamWorks making the software available under an open source license. She also tells us about Open Moonray reaching a milestone. Quoting Christine, "Below's promise of continued collaboration became evident on Tuesday with the announcement of the release of Open Moonray 1.5. This latest release adds plenty of new hardware support, including support for NVIDIA Optix 7.6, Intel Embry 4.2 race tracing kernels, and the VFX reference platform 2023. It also provides new features such as adding initial implementation of a new adaptive lighting sampling scheme and several improvements to, I'm not even sure if I should try to say this out, DWA tune material for non-photorealistic looks. I have links in the show notes to Christine's article and to Open Moonray 1.5 release notes for those who want more information, because I know you're getting tired of hearing me.
There's some interesting stuff about this. So one of the things that really strikes me, if you go to the Open Moonray distro and you go to their pull requests, there are open pull requests. But if you go to the closed pull requests, they are all closed without merging. And there's about 17 of them. And people are, trying to write fixes, open a pull request, the pull request gets merged, and there'll be like 2 or 3 different pull requests for the same thing. And finally, one of the people at DreamWorks apparently will come back and say, this has been integrated. It will be part of this next release, which is really kind of fascinating because it tells you the way that they're doing this. Yes, they have released it as open source, but they're still doing all the development here in-house, and then they're just doing big source releases when they're ready to bump a version, which is, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but at the same time, you kind of miss out on some of the open source juice when you do it that way. You're missing out on part of the point. So just fascinating to see the way that works. All right, let's talk databases. Oh, we don't talk databases enough on the show. David, are you kind of a database nut, or is this just the story that was interesting?
A little bit of both. I'll get into why the story's interesting, but yes, definitely a bit of a database nut. Do a lot of web dev stuff. Yep. That's all database driven.
Yep.
But my SQL used to be like the open source database, and a long time ago, there was some concerns with where the project was headed. So some of the core developers actually split off, or maybe one, I don't remember the story specifically, so I don't want to misquote there, and started MariaDB. Now, the interesting thing about that and the stories that I'm bringing are a couple of articles, one by InfoWorld and one by TechCrunch, about the challenges that the commercial project is having. And the distinction, what I find interesting about that specifically is the distinction between that and the open source or community edition. So they attempted to go public early last year. The stories go into quite a bit of detail about the struggles they experienced. And some of that, if you're as old as I am, you'll probably remember the .com crashes and some of the other things where there seems to be certain industries that just when you get into the stock market, there's more money than there may be technical detail available. And so it's a case, I think, where they were just seeing dollar signs around databases without really understanding how open source works. And so they sunk a lot of money into this, and it just hasn't worked well. They have a couple of different projects that they've released and had to cut back on. And all of that has led up to what's making the news right now. And that is where there is a let me quote this correctly here, a unsolicited, non-binding proposal from a equity company, K1, at a stock price of 55 cents per share, attempting to buy it. And they have until March 19th, I think, to actually make a decision on it. But on the open source side, there is the MariaDB Foundation, and it is doing great. It's actually, you're finding a lot of people leaving the commercial software, going to the community edition of the software. And in fact, it's got a major sponsorship deal with Amazon Web Services that just got inked recently. So this commercial entity may not survive, but the community-driven open source project has green skies ahead of it.
Yeah, there's some interesting details that go along with this. So we didn't talk exactly about why MySQL was forked. MySQL got bought by Sun, which was everyone was reasonably happy about, and then Sun got bought by Oracle, and then now MySQL is an Oracle product. And let's just say that not everybody loves having Oracle running their open source projects.
Yeah, or much of anything.
Or much of anything.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I heard something fairly recently, I feel, about something to do with, I mean, up until now, they've been compatible with their SQL queries. But I thought I heard something about one of them changing to the fact that some things may not be one-to-one compatible in the future.
Oh, they haven't been one-to-one compatible for a little while now. I think
I want to say with MariaDB, there's still like a version, or not a version, but a mode that you put it into where it attempts to be compatible with MySQL.
Yeah, there's a subset of commonality. So like one thing I know, because I've had to use it myself, is MySQL started supporting native JSON data types earlier than MariaDB did. I think they both do now, but there's definitely been some of those more specialized functions that are only available in one or the other, but there is a subset of commonality between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right. All right. I think I am going to go ahead and talk about Micron. And so this one is pretty interesting because, well, the guy that would know the most and be allowed to say the least is not here. But a developer from Micron pushed into the Linux kernel on the mailing list a new file system. It's the FAMFS, which it's for fabric attached memory. And so you're deep into the weeds of like the modern equivalent of big iron. So this is like big data center deployments. It's where you have your entire portions of your data center just treated almost as one big machine, and there's things that is fabric attached, which essentially means that it's either memory or it's storage that's not physically on the computer, it's out over Ethernet or fiber or however it is that you're connected together. And this new file system it's really pretty interesting. It's the first one, as far as I know, in the kernel that really does exactly what this does. And so because of that, it is stretching the kernel a bit in new ways. There are some interesting notes in the, it's not really a pull request, it's more a request for comments, but the email to the mailing list. So for example, couldn't we do this with Fuse? It's like, well, yes, we could, except we have a performance requirement. And Fuse does not do very well for high performance. There are some interesting notes, questions people have asked about why it's done this way and that way. But for the most part, it's just little cleanup things. There was one clever thing in there that kind of tickled me, and it was a comment to why is this MU? What is this from? And by the way, it collides with something else that we do. But where did this MU come from? And the developer, John Groves, a Micron employee, goes, well, maybe I was trying to be too clever there, but MU is a reference to Micron. It's like, oh, that's kind of clever. So we don't talk about Micron doing a whole lot with the Linux kernel, but here they are pushing out potentially a new kernel driver. So that is pretty neat to see. We'll see what becomes of it. Hopefully it makes it.
Are you going to try to get the author for this on Floss Wiki?
Yeah, if John wants to chat about it, if his corporate overlords will allow him to, that's sometimes how that goes. But yeah, if he wants to, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be really fascinating to talk to somebody in the corporate world that is trying to push something into the kernel. I think that would be a really interesting viewpoint to talk about all that from.
Yeah, I thought Jeff was going to fly down there and try to talk him into it sometime.
That might be in the cards. We'll see. We will see. All right. Well, let's go ahead and transition to Rob. What is Wunderlist? Wunderlist? I don't even know how this is pronounced.
Wunderlist.
Wunderlist. What are you talking about?
So, as I've probably said before, I do use Windows at work.
Wow.
It's just how it is. And I happen to be an avid listener to Windows Weekly, actually, know thy enemy kind of thing. And I enjoy their banter. So, and why I bring that up is I could be remembering this wrong, but I think it was Paul Thurrott that recommended a to-do app called Wunderlist or Wunderlist. It is German, I believe. And I believe it was a few years ago. I'm pretty sure he recommended this. So at some point, I tried the app and I loved it. It worked on Windows at work, but it also worked on my Linux desktop at home. So it was a great to-do app. Now, I don't recall if at the time Paul Thurrott brought it up, if it was already purchased by Microsoft or not, but at some point they did purchase it, and shortly after that I started using it, and shortly after that they shut it down. So I was rather disappointed in that, but now it is back, kind of, sort of. So the original creator of Wunderlist, apparently they weren't happy with it being shut down either. And they have launched a brand new app they called Superlist. After 12 months of beta testing, it's been released with a free for individuals forever plan. And that's assuming they don't sell out again and get shut down. But that offer, it includes unlimited tasks, notes, reminders, unlimited private lists, 5 shared lists with up to 5 people, Gmail, Google Calendar, Microsoft To Do, and email forwarding, email task summarization, about 10 megabits upload, and 500 megabits of file storage. For a simple to-do list, this should be enough for most people, but if you really want to go all in, there are paid plans starting at $8 a month, and they're targeting like businesses, distributed teams, collaborative needs with pro features like larger file uploads, integrations with GitHub and Figma, unlimited list sharing, and the promise, or as Joey Sneddon says, threat of AI features. So a few possible downsides for Linux enthusiasts like us at launch is that it isn't open source. Native apps are only available on iOS, Android, and macOS, but they have a web app that obviously will work anywhere. And back in 2011, Wunderlist, they did have that's when their native Linux app was released. So, I'm hoping that these same folks will follow that path again and maybe stop that path before they sell it to Microsoft. But, get far enough along that they have a Linux app again. And, perhaps with some time, we'll see, more Linux features to Linux. But if not, and you are one of those that miss Wunderlist, you may still want to give Superlist a shot because Joey Sneddon points out in his article a to-do app, it's probably most useful on a mobile device like a phone. It's probably where most people are going to use it anyway. But if you want to access that same list on your computer, you can use it. You can do it using the web or you can always create a standalone shortcut for the web app in Google Chrome, Chromium, or Epiphany Web, and it's going to provide a better experience than most Electron-based wrappers anyway. So I haven't given it a shot yet. I've kind of replaced Wunderlist years ago, but I might check it out. It was a great interface back in the day, and they're trying to pick up where they left off, is what I understand. So there's a to-do list program maybe you want to check out.
I think real open source junkies use org mode inside Emacs. Forget this whole GUI stuff, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Emacs. Where's Leo when you need him?
Yeah, or Randall Schwartz, or yeah.
So this discussion could easily jump into one of my soapboxes, but it mentions using the web app functionality, which is built into Chromium. I do web app development, and I think that is the future because it's truly cross-platform.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best option, and the fact that it's not natively supported in Firefox, and I prefer Firefox over Chromium, is something that's irritating. So that's it. I'm off the soapbox. But
yeah, it was pretty irritating when they got rid of that feature in Firefox. But
yeah, I think with Firefox, it's just a matter of limited amount of resources and what do they want to prioritize.
They could take that
how much they're paying their CEO. But
I was going to say they could take that CEO money and they could, put a few developers towards it.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're really not wrong. But anyway, yes, Ken.
The problem with any to-do list, though, is converting from one that you're already using to a new one. You got to do all that typing over again.
Is your to-do list that long?
Maybe you should get some stuff done.
It goes back to when I started using a to-do list on my Palm.
Oh, you want to keep the history of all of that stuff that you've done,
so you can go back and tell
in handy.
So you can tell your wife all the things you've done over the years. Look, I did dishes 10 years ago.
Well, not necessarily that. When you're doing your biography.
I mean,
I'm not that interesting.
I can see
Ken did dishes in 2010. Laundry in 2012.
I could see the point in being able to say, "Oh, you remember that time that we did that thing?" and be able to look at your to-do list and this thing on this date. I can see that, being able to keep track of all of that. I can see the point of having the historical data. Makes sense. The other thing I can see the point of is running the newest version of Ardor. And I think Ken is going to tell us about that. What is up with 8.4 and what happened to 8.3?
Well, I'll let my favorite 9 to 5 Linux writer, Marius Nestor, bring in the information about that. He's basically writing about the release of a new maintenance update to Jonathan's favorite digital audio workstation.
Yo.
Or as some of us like to say, DAW. And as Jonathan said, it's Ardor 8.4. Now, unfortunately, there's a critical bug in 8.3, so they just decided to skip it and go straight to working on 8.4, which introduces experimental support for importing advanced authoring format files. I think we'll just call those AAF from now on. Please provide feedback and report bugs since this feature is experimental. Another important change in Ardor 8.4 is an updated graphics user interface toolkit using GTK to ensure Ardor will be supported on current and future versions of popular GNU Linux distributions. It also allows users and Linux distro maintainers to continue building Ardor from sources. This release introduces a new, thank you GNOME, Adwaita color theme, which is based on GNOME's Adwaita theme, improving support for newer Linux distributions by allowing you to use Ardor --GDB to start it. Even got a command line tip in there.
There you go.
Ardor 8.4 also updates support for several controllers including Akai MIDI Mix, Lexicon MPX 100, Yamaha's SY85, and Faderport 8. Marius mentioned some others in his article. In addition, it also sets the default MIDI CC values to be more in line with MIDI specs. As always, there's a lot more information in Marius' article than what I've shared, including a link to Ardor's 8.4's release notes. Jonathan, have you updated to Ardor 8.4 yet?
Not yet. I figured I better wait until after we get done with the show. There's not a whole lot that's in there that's new. To let you know how far behind I am, I still have this guy, which is the Launchpad Mini, and it is now officially supported in Ardor, and I haven't actually plugged it back into the computer to play with it yet. And that's been a while now that it's been supported. My to-do list is very full. Yeah. Lots of stuff to go play with that I've not been able to yet.
You don't even have time to move that to-do list to Wunderlist or Superlist.
Nope, I really don't. I really don't.
Wonder what? Anyway.
So one fun thing is the 8.3 release. What actually happened is they tagged 8.3, which that's a Git term that basically means that they put a label at a revision in their source code and said, essentially, this is the freeze. This is what we're going to call 8.3. And before they could get the binaries actually fully released and pushed out the door, they discovered a vulnerability. And I don't remember the details of the vulnerability, but it was something like you go to open this file and it'll let you arbitrarily execute code. Something real bad like that. And rather than try to muck about with changing the tags, because when you a lot of the ways that the continuous integration gets set up these days, when you make a tag, it starts, your tool chains start firing, your continuous integration runs, and to try to change where that was tagged it's a headache. So they just said, "Oh, forget it." Went with 8.4, and like I said, just bug fixes in this one, which is kind of nice. To
no AI involved.
Thankfully, hopefully, and I know the people over there at Ardor, and so I expect this will be the case. Hopefully, Ardor will not officially jump into the AI thing, at least not anytime soon. Yeah, for sure.
What do you think about that, David?
Oh, well, we don't talk about AI enough on this show. Every other TWiT show talks about AI at least 3 times per episode.
I try to bring it up whenever I can. I think I'm going to bring it up at least twice this episode.
Okay.
I think David actually has a story about AI. We're going to let him get to that.
So I came across a headline that I was interested in. I decided to point out to everyone else here. Google just open sourced its AI-powered tool, Magica, to help step up the cybersecurity ecosystem. But what's interesting about it, at least from my perspective, is it classifies files based on their content and many other things, and it is faster than almost every other option out there. Plus, it is very light. I think it's only... Yeah, it only weighs about 1 meg, the deep learning model that has been tailored and trained for it. So it's something that you can install with Python. It's a pip install. I don't know that we've ever really talked about pip, and I'm not going to sideline us right now. But basically, if you run Python, you can install it, you can run it, and I can see many uses just on the back end, especially for web development and stuff, where maybe you're not even dealing with malicious data so much as you may be having people uploading a bunch of different types and versions of files and things, and you need to be able to classify them very quickly. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
I tell you what sounds the most interesting to me is running through something like this through Magica and then comparing the results of that to the file extension, the actual, dot 3 letters, but also comparing the results of that to the magic bits at the beginning that I think just the file command looks at, because Linux already has built into it at least one way, the file command, to look at a file and try to figure out what it is. But it would be really interesting to compare those outputs. Like,
that might be a really quick way of getting suspicious things noted.
Exactly. So it's a .png, and when you look at it, Linux thinks it's a .png, but Magica thinks it's an executable. Ooh, you may have a problem. That's really fascinating. All right, let's go to let's talk about Phoronix for a minute. This is something that's been driving me nuts. I'm curious if any of you guys have seen this either. You go to Phoronix, I think for me it was on my mobile particularly. You go to Phoronix and you get like an error, what was it, 400 or 500? Cookies or header is too long. Have any of you guys seen that this week?
I have not.
Was it just me? It may have just been me. Somehow, something got cached on my phone, and I think it was just my phone. I don't remember seeing it on any of the desktop browsers, but on just my phone, that was blocking Phoronix for me. And it wasn't doing it all the time. It was doing it from time to time. Like, you could go to Phoronix and the homepage would work, but you go to click on one of the stories and it wouldn't load. And so I guess this is sort of a tip. All I needed to do was clear the site settings for Phoronix. And so on your Chrome, your Android Chrome browser, there is the symbol up by the site name. So in the Explorer bar, you've got the little setting symbol there. And one of the options is data stored for this site, I believe. So you go into that and it will tell you, it thinks about it for a minute and it goes, I am storing 1.7 megabytes or however much it is for this site. And then there's the little trash can there. And essentially what that's doing is it's getting rid of your cookies and your history and all of those saved settings for the site. Trash those and it works just fine. So it was probably a cookie. Probably what happened is Phoronix changed something in their cookies. Maybe it was a temporary bug and I just happened to visit the site while they were pushing out these ginormous cookies. I don't know. But if anyone is having trouble getting to Phoronix, that's what you need to do. Go clear the Phoronix site settings.
And that Android tip, Android is Linux too, so.
That's right. If you're on Android, you're running Linux. Okay.
Wonder if it might have been,
Are you going to ask if AI could have told us how to fix this?
No.
Oh, well, see,
I was just wondering if it was something that might have been carried over by the Chrome browser from the desktop to your phone that it didn't like.
Maybe. Hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
See, I thought Rob was going to ask if it was something that AI could fix because Rob has an AI story. So
we all know that answer.
Yeah.
So,
take it away, Rob.
This story has all our favorite topics all bundled into one. It has Rust. It has AI. Sorry to those in the Discord. Yeah, sorry for those in the Discord who are tired of AI. But it has AI, the terminal, and of course it has Linux. What I'm talking about is the Rust-based terminal called Warp. It is now available for Linux, and it includes AI features. So a terminal with AI, you say, what could that possibly do for you? So this terminal functions almost more like an IDE or text editor by offering filtering and selections. So you can use your mouse to select a text in your long one-liner command. For example, let's say you got a one-word typo in the middle of your very long one-liner command. Traditional terminals, you'd have to arrow all the way back to get to that word, way back to that text. But with Warp, you can just select it with a mouse and edit it. I know there's some other ways, but on here you just select it and then edit it, nice and easy. So not only is there cursor positioning, but it can include multiple cursors, auto completion, syntax highlighting. Commands are grouped in a block-based grouping structure. It's kind of difficult to describe that feature. But if you watch the video, if you're interested in what that's talking about, I'd suggest going to the show notes, finding that video and watching more details on it, because it's kind of a neat way to do it, to go back and look through your commands you've ran. So until now, previously, Warp was only available on macOS, but as one of their highest ranked features, or highest voted features, I guess, feature requests, it is now available on Linux, and it is already feature compatible with the Mac OS one. So everything works right on day one, because apparently 98% of the code is pretty much the same. I don't know why they waited this long. So as mentioned at the top, Warp is built on Rust, including the Cosmic Text library from System 76, along with their own UI framework, which they apparently plan to open source at some point. The autocomplete feature shows a box with descriptions of the flags you could run. So, you got these autocomplete flags up there, and it'll tell you what it does too. So like, well, okay, I know there's a -B, but what's -B do? I don't know. So also built right in the terminal is the ability to chat directly with the AI interface, as you might do with ChatGPT or Microsoft's Copilot features. So, if you forget a command or you want to run, you forget the command that you want to run, you can type pound or hashtag, as the kids say today.
These days.
Just type that hashtag and then describe in natural language what you're trying to do, and it'll help you out, figure out the command and everything. You can use the AI to debug your errors. So much more. So, as I told someone in the Discord earlier who said they're tired of AI, I love AI. I mean, maybe we do hear too much, but I love AI. All the things natural language model tools can do for us today. For those watching the video, my backgrounds pretty much all this year have been AI generated. I have a topic, I can generate some fun little background to kind of match up with what I'm going to talk about, and away I go. Super easy. I find it game changing. I do plan to install Warp. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm going to install it tomorrow or maybe after the show here. But there is one feature to Warp that has a lot of potential users saying, no way, it's not for me. And that is the fact that to use Warp, you do have to log in to either a free or a paid account. A lot of people find it odd, to have to log in to use your own terminal on your computer. But if you aren't bothered by it logging in, you're using a cloud service. If you're not bothered by logging into your own terminal, it seems it could be a very powerful tool. In fact, maybe this is a tool that maybe it should have been called. Maybe they should have saved the name, and this should have been called PowerShell. Anyway, I've been testing. I plan to test this. I've been testing a lot of new things lately, and one of these days, I'm going to need to have a little housekeeping corner. I don't know what I'll call it, but somewhere where I can update you all on things like my experience with what I find out using Warp, and my little review that I'm going to have for me having used OpenSUSE for, I don't know, past 3 weeks or so now. So I got some things to catch up on and share with you later, and Warp will be in that list. So I'll tell you how if it's any good or if it's all hype.
I've got a question. I think the important question, even bigger than you've got to have an account logged in to be able to use it, and that is the AI model running on your local computer, or is Warp sending all of your keystrokes off to the Warp servers?
That was the first thought I had.
Of course it's sending it off to the remote servers.
Well, I don't know the answer, but I'm fairly confident if you're doing the chat with it, that it's sending it off, and that's part of the explanation for it needing an account.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, does it send off every little command? Like if you do, SSH username, password, or is it sending all that off? Boy, that's a good point.
Yeah. And so the other thing is, are they then used? Because this is the way I would do it. If I didn't care, we should just stop that sentence there. I would take the commands that my users run and fold that back into the language model, right? That would be the best way to train it, except that means you're training it with people's real data and passwords, and then all you have to do is make your model
and typos.
Well, typos too, but then all you have to do is find one of those ways to jailbreak your model, get it to hallucinate, and then start spitting out real user sessions, and well, suddenly you go scrape everybody's passwords off of it. I get the heebie-jeebies about this. I do not.
Just go to the dark side all the time. They got it all figured out. They used AI to figure out how to do it right.
Ah, you're not making it better. This is not making me feel better about it.
Or AI is Skynet's pretending is like, oh yeah, it's all safe.
It's fine. It's fine. You can trust us.
I still gotta try it though. I'm gonna definitely be cautious about any sensitive
Put
data
it in the
though.
VM.
I would say,
And don't SSH out of it.
Yeah. Keep that particular snake in the box.
Came across something about an SSH snake.
Yes, that's actually a really cool open source project. That is also why we can't have nice things. I don't think we're talking about that today, but that's a cool SSH project.
It is down in the extra links though.
Aha,
It's like the third one down.
yes.
Y'all
There you go.
still want something to read after the show? Definitely follow that link.
I'm a little annoyed that when they wrote about it from a security standpoint, they called it a worm. It's like, no. A worm is a very specific thing, and this is not a worm. It's not. Anyway.
More like a Trojan?
Before we get off of this Warp AI console,
Go for
some
it.
good news. If you really want to use it, they're going to support Windows soon. And Microsoft's already stealing all your data off of that OS. So, what's one more?
There you go. You can use it with a clean conscience over in Windows.
I wonder if it would run under Wine or Codeweavers
Probably.
once they get it ported.
Maybe you would have to use Codeweavers 24 with 9.0. Oh, I flubbed it. Ken set me up so nicely, and I flubbed the transition. Oh, well. Ken, what's up with Codeweavers?
Well, as you mentioned, Jonathan, I don't even think we've covered it in a previous episode because I can't remember hearing it being talked. Wine.90 stable was released last month, as in January. But this week, Codeweavers, building atop Wine 9.0 stable, released Crossover 24. Now, this is according to Michael Larabella for Ronix. Then we've also got an article by Joyce Nedden, who mentions that it also includes Wine Mono 8.1.0, VKD 3D 1.10, and Molten VK 1.2.5 to ensure solid performance across the multiple different operating systems supported, and chance for me to trip over my tongue.
Of course.
You can now drag and drop executables onto the Crossover 24 main window to run or install them, and Portable's app standalone executables can be run without installing them. Just drag a standalone runtime onto a bottle and the app will do the rest. How to Geek's Corbin Davenport even points out that Codeweaver specifically mentions Planet Zoo, the Warframe standalone launcher, Mafia Definitive Edition, and Horizon Zero Dawn as some newly compatible games, and the latest installers for Microsoft Office 365 applications now work, as long as you use the 32-bit online installers. If you wish to store large Windows applications on an external drive, then you will be happy to hear you can change the directory where your bottles are stored. I recommend taking advantage of Codeweaver's recommended 2-week trial period before buying to see if any of the applications you want to run work with it. That way, you know it's worth buying. If you decide to purchase, then Joey's article includes a deal code to save 24%, again, 24% off Crossweaver's 24's price until March 2nd.
So CodeWeaver's crossover, it's sort of like Proton. In fact, I'm pretty sure the crossover guys are some of the devs doing the Proton development.
Valve works with crossover.
Yes, Valve is paying crossover to do some of that. But it's like you're in a corporate environment and you don't want to play games, but you still need wine solution.
Yeah, the crossover is like one way, like it supports like Office better than the regular wine. I know that's like one thing that I remember seeing in the past.
I really suspect that also it's paid support. Like businesses in particular, they want to pay money for their software. I don't fully understand that. I prefer not to pay money for my software if I can avoid it, but businesses are all about it.
Well,
they want
is
to,
it
but
pay for the software or pay for the support?
Yes, it's kind of one of the
it's
same.
all the same. Ken, though, I noticed you called out. You said you should try the 2-week trial or the 14-day trial, I guess. Just a question: did you go to the download page at all and actually watch that video on that page?
I did not go to the download page. I went ahead and was downloading something else for the command line tip.
So I do want to recommend just go to the download page, and there is a video on that page with somebody kind of describing it, and then basically really pushing. Just try the 14-day download. It's free. Why wouldn't you use it? I'm not going to go into everything it is, but it's actually pretty hilarious.
CodeWeavers or cross pushes for people to try before buying. The last time we covered it, they were doing that.
Yeah, it's a great video though. It's humorous.
Sounds like they're a little self-aware and poking a little fun at themselves.
He kind of at the end is like beep beep beep, and the guy goes storming off. Why wouldn't you try it? It's free.
And if you take the full 14 days, you'll get outside that discount period.
Interesting. All right, let's talk about not my favorite hardware company. What is up with NVIDIA? And David's got this one. What is up with NVIDIA?
I've got a couple of stories from our favorite website, or I guess one of our two favorite websites. But Michael Larabelle has 3 articles that I pulled out talking about things related to the ugly green company, NVIDIA. And I don't necessarily have any love lost for NVIDIA. However, I have fiscal and performance constraints that make me use Team Green hardware.
Yo.
So everything that pops up about better support or the potential for better support on Linux is something that I eagerly look at. So the first thing that I thought was quite interesting was a benchmark that he did a couple of days ago, or at least he posted a couple of days ago, about the NVIDIA 72-core Grace CPU versus the AMD Ryzen Threadripper workstation CPUs. The Threadrippers come out a little bit ahead, but still, it's interesting to see NVIDIA, who has been dominating the AI hardware market, starting to expand into some other areas, more general purpose CPUs. Now, these CPUs are focused on the data center, but still, anytime they're expanding their line, they're having to expand the software support and everything else. So you never know. There could be some cross-pollination, and more competition isn't bad. We've always been, Intel versus AMD in the CPU world. So if we have a third contender that is actually able to contend, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah,
and then
it's worth pointing out real quick that NVIDIA has had the Tegra series for half of forever. I think they sell a lot of those chips, or have historically, to Tesla to put into Tesla automobiles.
I was not aware of that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So no Vue driver has squeezed in a few last-minute minor additions for Linux 6.8. Most of those are focused around DRM fixes. And every time I say DRM, I think digital rights management, and they don't actually say what it is in here. So remind me what it is, Jonathan.
It's a direct rendering management.
Yeah,
one or the other.
okay. Yeah, it is not digital rights management. That's the important part.
Yeah.
But they've also got a patch for optionally enabling the NVIDIA GSP mode by default on Turing GPUs and newer, and a bunch of other fixes and things. And that is related, or not related, but relatedly, the Mesa 24.1 has landed, and it is improving the OpenGL on Vulkan implementation using something called Zink, Z-I-N-K, instead of OpenGL. So there's advances happening on the NVIDIA front. It would be really nice if NVIDIA themselves was more open and supporting of the open source ecosystem. But, and you know, we might be fighting against them, but still progress is being made.
There's a point there. Do we have one more story to cover with this?
That was the 3 stories.
Okay,
yeah.
That was the third. There's a point to be made there. We don't want to be fighting NVIDIA. We would love to love NVIDIA, and it's getting a little bit better. It's just there's some things that they do though. It's so frustrating to try to work with. I will tell you, I know one of the problems with NVIDIA is they've got part of the way their corporation works is employees. Let's see, how does this go? They've got like two different things that they do that makes them money. And for an employee to be able to spend time on anything, there has to be a direct line drawn from the thing that they want to work on to something that makes NVIDIA money. And so when you get into things that are just good for the community, like making Linux drivers better, it gets squashed because that doesn't make them any money. Now, again, it's getting a little bit better. Maybe they've backed off on that philosophy a little bit. But at one time, that was a pretty hard line in the sand that was drawn at NVIDIA. And it really made working with them difficult. The other weird...
Even if they...
What's that?
I was going to say, even if they are backing off of that a little bit, it seems to be everywhere but the GPU.
Yeah. Well,
or at least the consumer GPUs.
The consumer desktop GPUs. Because that's the other thing, is when it comes to the Tegra devices, you know, I've got a Tegra here on my desk that slots in nicely to the Turing Pi 2 sitting over there. When it comes to the Turing devices, or excuse me, the Tegra devices, they release stuff as open source. There is an official NVIDIA driver in the kernel for Tegra stuff. Will not play at all with their desktop cards. And so one of the other things that we've noted over the years is there's two separate NVIDIA companies. There's two separate teams, I guess, working in NVIDIA, and they have very different approaches to how they support different things. And it's just wild to see. But all that to say, we would love and are excited by the signs coming out that NVIDIA is getting a little bit more friendly towards open source and open sourcing things.
Another place that has plenty of money, so they can afford to do a little open source.
That's true.
Especially now that they're number 3?
Number three
For the United States. I saw another statistic that apparently NVIDIA is worth more than Canada now. That's something.
To who?
That is something. All right, let's move on from NVIDIA and let's see what is up next. Oh, I'm up next. That's right. So there's a thing. There is a new, very interesting thing that, next time I go looking for a laptop, I will have to consider this thing. The KDE Slim Book. So this is just announced by KDE. It is a laptop that is It is literally a KDE branded laptop. Now, the only disappointing thing is that they're shipping KDE Neon on it. I would replace that with Fedora 40 with KDE because, in my opinion, that's really about the best place to run KDE these days. Just make sure that you don't install the X11 packages. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's a very interesting little laptop. So it comes with it's AMD, of course. It's got the Ryzen 7 7840HS, which is a nice little chip. 16 threads on it. It'll boost up to 5.1 gigahertz. You can slap like up to 64 gigs of memory. And this thing comes with a Radeon 780M. So it's got its own little GPU in there beside the CPU. Really fascinating little laptop. And they're selling it for 999 euros, which I have no idea what that converts to in freedom units. But if you pay enough money, they will send one to you, I am sure.
Probably about 1200.
Somewhere in there, yeah. Which, honestly, for a decent laptop, is not terrible. It's like it's an all aluminum frame. It seems pretty decent. So
how can Fedora be a better place to run KDE than the flagship KDE Neon?
I know.
So was this episode pitch to get this laptop?
Honestly, if it were, and I know I'm the one that brought this story and I'm going to just shoot it down. When I go to replace my laptop, I'm probably going to be looking at the frameworks. I'm probably going to be looking very hard at the frameworks. This one is just fascinating because it's something new KDE is doing. About the Fedora issue, one of the big problems with KDE Neon is it's built on Ubuntu and it is locked to the Ubuntu releases. No. Wait. This is not me hating on Ubuntu. This is Ubuntu running behind on, and it's not just that it's based on Ubuntu. KDE Neon is based on Ubuntu LTS. All right. Which means that by the time you get finally to a new LTS release, you're running an old kernel. And by default, it is shipping a really old version of KDE, which means that it's even harder for the KDE Neon folks to push Neon into that distro to make Neon, or to the whole KDE framework into it to make Neon, because there's so many things that need to be changed. In my testing of Neon, I have found things that were just broken because it wasn't a new enough kernel. And then the other problem that we're getting into, we are about to see a new Ubuntu LTS is not going to be running KDE 6. It's going to be running the KDE 5 series still. And so KDE Neon is really not that great because it's based on Ubuntu, and Ubuntu ships old stuff on their LTS releases. I don't know of a better place to run KDE than Fedora, honestly.
Yeah, that is probably an issue with that. I mean, sure, if it's KDE Neon right after the LTS has shipped, it's probably not too bad. Except
this time around, where the LTS is shipping the 5 series. It's shipping the KDE release is going to be unsupported when they make the release.
But still, most of the time, the LTSs are fairly up to date when they release. So I can see it not being too bad under those circumstances. But as you get out there to 6 months, to a year out, to 18 months out, yeah, you're getting stale. I mean, I like my rolling releases, so I don't like anything stale at all. But
Marora points out OpenSUSE a tumbleweed, and yes, actually, that is Tumbleweed. KDE on Tumbleweed is one of the other places where it's pretty good.
I am on OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, and I have tried KDE on there too. Not Sex, but I've tried KDE on there, and I'll tell you all about it in sometime in the future.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
How far down your list is trying Calpa? Do I remember how it said?
Yeah.
Let's see. Where's my list? It's way down there.
That was fun though. Chatting with Sean about Calpa.
I don't have a very big list. Gen 2 is on there. That might be it.
Just Gentoo. So I guess by definition, Kalpa is right after Gentoo then, right?
I guess it is. I want to try at least, all the mainstream lines. I'm not all that interested in going into the niches unless there's something really interesting about it, which I don't know anything about Kalpa. I feel like maybe you mentioned that last week on the show. And
I interviewed the lead dev for Kalpa on Floss Weekly. Kalpa is KDE, a KDE version of the OpenSUSE Atomic Desktop.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I do want to try some of the various Atomic Desktops just so I can dig into it and just kind of see how they all work. So I have a legitimate, a good answer. Because one thing I often say, on Facebook and various Linux groups I'm on, there's always the argument about distro hopping. Mm-hmm. There's those who say distro hopping is for noobs, and then there's those who like to distro hop. And my argument,
just change your themes,
right? Yeah, the argument's always just find a distro you like, and you can make it look and act any way you want. There's no need to distro hop, which is true. But I find if you want to be a vocal, active community member, podcaster, contributor, it's beneficial to try various distros so you can, actually speak to it when somebody says, "Oh, that one sucks" or whatever, and you can say, "Oh, you can actually."
I've actually run it before.
Yeah, you can speak to it from experience. So that's always been my argument there, which is why I do want to try some of the Atomic Desktops.
Yeah.
So maybe Kalpa isn't as low on my list as I said. I just forgot what Kalpa was.
Makes sense. That's a fair point. We just like giving you a hard time about it.
I haven't hopped much since I've actually been on the show. I went to Fedora at the beginning. Then I spent 2 years on Arch. And now I'm on OpenSUSE. That's not a lot. I mean, okay, you've always been on Fedora. The other guys have always been on Ubuntu. I guess it's more than you guys. But.
I was going to say, that's a lot of hopping compared to some of us. I've been running Fedora as my primary OS for, at least 15 years. I would have to do the math to figure out exactly how long.
I won't be probably hopping to any of the Atomic Desktops as my primary OS, so it'll be on a VM or something, or on a spare if I have something around.
Makes sense. All right, let's move into some command line tips, and somehow Rob is up. So going from hopping to theming.
Yeah, no need to hop when you can just configure it to whatever you want. So I saw this tip on one of my groups. People wanted to know how to make their terminal look different ways, and you can do things manually, obviously. But this script, it's on GitHub, was a suggestion. So I did try it out. It's called theme.sh. You'll have to, you could probably find it pretty easy if you search GitHub. I think it was a first result usually when I search for it, but you can look at our show notes and find links to the GitHub on there too. So for those watching, once you install it via the directions, all you got to do is run theme.sh space -i. There's others, but this is the easiest one. And I will add a requirement to running the -i does require the fuzzy find, the FZF command to be installed. Mm-hmm. So I got an error the first time I tried it. I had to install the fuzzy find, which is a command line tip we've talked about quite a long time ago. But you may need to install that, or you have to use more manual methods. But what I'm going to show you is the -i method, because it's the one that I've worked with. So if you do that, it'll show a list of pre-configured made themes. For those watching, you could toggle right through on the right side. As I toggle through, it shows what all the different themes look like. Let me just pick one that's hideous right here, and and then there's my my terminal change. So that's all there is to it. There are a ton of themes on here already baked in, very slight differences. If you want to change how your terminal looks, give it a shot. I think it works anywhere there's a terminal.
Very cool. I love terminal theming. It's a lot of fun.
You know what? I forgot to share this here.
Oh, there were pictures.
Quick look. Yes, there is. So for those watching now, you can see that I'm changing the colors. I'm going to pick one here. Now it kind of looks like PowerShell, but that wasn't the PowerShell.
It's Windows
so
blue.
Anyway, it's Windows Blue. So yeah, easy, just like that. Change your theme.
Nice. All right, Ken is up next.
And yes, this tip is how you can bookmark those long commands instead of creating a short alias that you may forget using a terminal bookmarker created by Wen Den Lin. I think I said that right. I recommend following the link in the show notes for the installation instructions. That'll save me from tripping over my tongue trying to explain that. After you install, I'm going to go with TBMK as the shortcut for that. You can type these commands, or actually it's more of key bindings that it sets up. If you've got, as you see, I've got my screen up, you can type, say, find the right keys here.
Typing live.
So ExpressVPN connect. And then ExpressVPN. This is why you don't want to keep typing this one constantly.
Yeah. You only have one S in that second express.
That's right.
Derail the command line tip in the midst of it.
Instead of hitting enter, I'm going to hit Control T.
Oh. Commands bookmark and ask for a title. Hmm.
You can give it a short title or a real long title that explains what it does.
Yeah. But
then you hit enter, and you'll see that it says it already exists. I'm going to say no.
Then how do you run it back is the question.
Hit escape to get back to the command line.
Well.
Now, if you are at an empty command line, to run it back, Control space, and it gives you a list of your bookmarks.
Ah, cool.
And as you can see, there I have for disconnecting, run that. It puts it on the command line, and it says I'm disconnected.
I know somebody that could probably benefit from this. She has a tendency to just hit the arrow up button until she finds whatever the last command was that she wanted to use. And that seems like that might actually be a pretty useful tip for that certain person that is going to remain nameless.
Don't we all just do the arrow up button? I know sometimes I do history, pipe, grep, and a word in there, but
actually I just do SRCH space and part of the word. I've got an alias set up.
That's great. And then you can use the exclamation mark and the number. So, if that was history line 2312, you can just go exclamation mark 2312 and hit enter, and it'll run it again for you. It's great. Oh no. I hear somebody's battery backup beeping at them.
Not me.
Yours or mine?
Somebody's.
How's your battery level?
The battery level's good.
Oh, all right. David, I'm going to go to you next, and I will ask first, what is the best terminal multiplexer, and why is it GNU Screen?
I already talked about GNU Screen first time I was on here. So GNU Screen is the best in a very small subset of circumstances, specifically when you're operating on very old versions of Linux that don't have access to TMUX, because TMUX is the terminal emulator. Not emulator, terminal multiplexer. And I use this every single day. The beautiful thing about it, and there is a lot of crossover between GNU Screen and TMUX. First off, we'll just put that out there. I've got a link in the show notes to the Getting Started wiki, which is a great jumping off place for it. But TMUX it's all in terminal, so it's all keyboard shortcuts. Control B is kind of what kicks it off by default, and it's all configurable, so you can change it if you want to. But simple things that I do constantly with it is Control B in, and that pops up a new terminal so that I can have a program running in one terminal and leave it in the background and go switch to a new terminal and do something else. Another thing that you often need to do is be able to watch multiple things at the same time. I've mentioned briefly, that I do a lot of web dev. A lot of what I do is Python Flask based web dev against a database engine, Redis, running in the background, MySQL. So I will use the splitting functionality, which again, you can do Control B to tell TMUX you want it to do something, and then %sign splits horizontally left and right, and then, or the double quote splits up and down vertically. I guess actually it's reversed horizontal and vertically, but it splits it up and down. The double quote does, and % split side to side. Another thing that I use quite often is your ability to connect multiple connections into TMUX. So I actually have more than one computer that I'm working on in front of me daily. And so I will SSH into my main machine from my other machines and all connect to TMUX so that I may have one screen showing one specific terminal, like say terminal 1 in TMUX, and I've got my other machine showing terminal 2, and then I may be working in terminal 3, and it's all within TMUX, so you can easily just switch back and forth. You can have multiple machines or multiple connections to TMUX showing the same screen. So I had one situation where and it was actually with screen, but you can do the same thing with TMUX. So I'm not knocking TMUX, but some of that crossover. I was remoted into a server in a New York data center, and I had another engineer that was working on it as well, and we needed to work on the same thing at the same time. We actually needed to see some output and stuff. He was in Nashville. I was here in North Carolina. We were both SSH'd into that server, and we were using Screen to access the same terminal and see what each other was typing and actually, be able to discuss what we were seeing on the screen in real time. So there's just all kinds of really cool things when you're talking about working from the terminal that TMUX lets you do.
Yep.
So that's why TMUX is better than Screen.
There you go. It's a lot of fun. A lot of fun stuff you can do with both of them. One of my favorite stories of doing something clever on the command line. I had, I think was he a Digium employee? Anyway, I had some phone hardware I was trying to make work with Asterisk, and it wasn't working. And they finally, in desperation said, "Can we SSH into your machine?" It's like, well, sure, let me go set that up. And so I set him up a user account that defaulted going into a GNU Screen session so that I could log into the same session and watch what they were doing. That was a lot of fun to then, in the midst of his debugging, to start typing in messages. Much fun was had, and I wish I could have seen the look on the tech's face when I started doing that. Anyway, I've got a command line tip that I want to cover too. I learned about this one just today. So I've got to set this up for you just a little bit. You're working on an open source project and you use Git to manipulate it, and you do your work in VS Code, and there are some settings files that VS Code manipulates. And let's say that those settings files have been checked into Git for one reason or another. Sometimes there's a good reason to do that. Well, in this particular project, every time you change anything or recompile it, your local copy of VS Code makes changes to those .VS Code files. And it drives you nuts because every time you go to make a commit, you have to go up and revert the change to that file before you make the commit or what have you. Turns out that Git is the solution to this. There is a command. You can tell Git a git update -index and then -- assume unchanged and then the file name. And Git will basically just stop watching that file on your computer. It'll say, oh, I'm just going to assume that my user has not touched that file at all. And it will then leave you alone and stop bugging you every time VS Code makes a change to that file. And this is not just limited to VS Code, of course. But in my case, that's the one where it was. I like working with VS Code most of the time. But sometimes it drives me nuts. So this is a way to get away from one way that it drives me nuts. Git is smart enough to ignore it.
I understand why you like it. It's a Microsoft product and all.
No. I like it because it's an open source product. And it's got some cool features. And I kind of hold my nose that it's Microsoft. Try to forget that part while I'm using it. We're just kidding. We love you, Microsoft.
So you could play a joke on somebody and put that into theirs, and then their GitHub, their Git commits wouldn't be pushed.
I suppose if you get access to their computer and you really want to. Yeah. Why? I swear I changed that file. Why is it not showing up? Yeah, you could if you really wanted to be evil like that. You could. All right. It has been fun. Thank you to each of you for being here. I will let each of you get the last word in. If there's anything you want to plug, do it now. And we will start with David.
Okay. So I am excited that we are getting spread out to the wide world of the internet. We're no longer exclusively behind the TWiT membership, but I want to take the opportunity to plug TWiT. If you're hearing this and you're not in our Discord because you're not a TWiT member, you should become a TWiT member. It's awesome. It's $7 a month. And it's completely worth it. I can't speak for anybody else, but for myself, I have been a member since they set up the member opportunity. I am not a paid employee of TWiT. TWiT does not give me anything other than the awesome opportunity to hang out with these great guys and talk about Linux and open source. But everything that we can do to just keep it growing is worth doing.
Absolutely. I approve this message. Rob.
All right. So let's get the right screen up here this time. Everything David said is great. I agree with that. It's great being in the public. Come join us. But another place to connect with just me alone, is at robertpcampbell.com. Where's my... I don't know. robertpcampbell.com right there below me.
It's over there somewhere.
And then there's links to my... Why am I so messed up today? Links to my LinkedIn, Mastodon, and a place to donate a coffee to me.
Rob,
connect.
Rob, we ask ourselves that every week. We haven't figured it out yet. Ken!
Rob, you choked me up there. But Dave, I want to say it's worth paying $7 just to be on this with you.
There you go.
And also, for those of you with the artistic bent, Kubuntu is calling on all graphics designers and artists to help shape their future.
Uh-huh.
Follow the link that I've got in the show notes at the ending, and it will, if you want to find out more about that.
All right. Very cool. All right, guys. Thank you for being here. Thanks for sticking around through some technical difficulties at the beginning of the show, but hey, we made it happen. And I want to say a special thank you to those of you that listen in the Discord. We do appreciate it, all of our Club TWiT folks. And then thank you to everyone that listens on the download, both inside and outside the club. We sure appreciate it. And hey, we will see you next week on the Untitled Linux Show.